We will keep it interactive first of all, and if you have any doubt, you can either drop a message in the chat or you can unmute yourself and just ask us as we are just 10 people. So that would be great. So, first of all, I would like to throw this question that what in your opinion internet is? Anyone can unmute and
Global communications protocol.
okay, all right. Anything else?
Connection of some systems over net. Something like that. Sorry.
What is it meant?
Network of decentralized network of computers. One word.
All right. So, other than the network of computers, Radko has added a word decentralized here, right? Okay. So, why do you think it's a decentralized network of computers?
Because we have servers who are running the actual web, and they're not connected in any other way than one to each other. The data is not. You know what I mean? It's decentralized.
Okay. All right. So, we'll come to this current state of internet, but as you all currently pointed, that it is a system of computers, individual computers, which are connected to each other in some way or the other, so that they can talk to each other. So it is a global communication protocol, not a protocol, but communication system in which individual systems are connected to each other. So this internet, it started with ARPANET, which was in US in 1969. So in 1960s, there were few computers here. So I just do a little bit of drawing. Just me. All right. So now I'm able to draw. So initially, ARPANET have had only 4 computers, 4, 5, 10 computers. So these computers were located at major universities all around the US, and it also included some government agencies. So these universities included University of Utah, um, I guess it was UCLA also. So there were some universities in which some research were going on, and along with government agencies, these computers were able to talk to each other. Okay, so they were connected in some order. So using some phone line connections, the initial dial-up connections that we have had. So these computers were able to talk to each other. All right. So this traffic in between these computers, this was purely research based. So it could be used to send files from one computer to another. For example, if this system here wanted to access this particular system, it can log into the system, look at the files here, and just take a peek or take some files from the system. So it was a file sharing protocol between these systems which are connected into ARPANET. Additionally, it was used for sending messages. Later on, email service was also added. Right? So these were the little services, and this was the uh, scope of ARPANET. So initially, to communicate with all these systems, each of the system need to keep a copy of address of all other computers um, in the ARPANET. So this system will need to have addresses of all the other 3 systems. This particular system would need to have addresses of all the other 3 systems. All right. So this was the way initial internet was developed. So we'll just put a pin here and we'll visit. Why am I telling it? I'll let you know. Then this system evolved actually because more number of computers were added to the system. All right, so ARPANET was growing and it reached even outside of US and some of the places in Europe like London. So they were also added into this ARPANET. So it grew from some tens of computers to some hundred of computers in around the 1970s. All right. Now, to maintain the addresses of these 100 computers was getting difficult because now each system here, because these are not four systems now, these are 100 systems now. All right. So these 100 systems, each system has to have the updated address of rest of the systems in the network. All right. So the connections at that time, you can say they were very lousy. The computers were continuously connecting, disconnecting. New computers were being added. So these tables have to be updated. All right. So a frequent updation of these tables was needed here. All right. So this was getting a very overwhelming for all the systems. So what they did was they chose one of the system out of the networks in ARPANET as a centralized repository. Okay, so by centralized repository, it means now this system will have record of address of all the computers. Okay, so this here will have address of all the computers, and this was here a central system. All right. Now, if this computer here wants to make a connection or send a file to this one computer here or any other computer in the ARPANET, so it would first request the central repository and ask for the address because initially this email service it requires actually address of all the computers which are in way to send email to a particular computer. Okay, so it required the route of the computer. So that is called routing table in networking terms. It was required. So they created a central repository. All right, but this ARPANET, this is ARPANET. Even in 70s, this ARPANET was totally official, like it was kind of a private network and other commercial traffic was not allowed into this. At the same time in 70s, various such networks were getting created. So these were all private networks, but they were not allowed into they were not connected with others. So we can say that these were these were some distributed systems or distributed networks which were created. So there were some tens and hundreds of such small networks were being created across the globe. Now people thought that they should be allowed actually connection between these networks. So now if I have to connect to this network, it should be made possible. If network 3 makes need to make a connection with ARPANET, so that should be allowed. Right? But at that time, there was a big problem. In the meantime, this network 2 also has a centralized repository of address of all the systems in this network. Similarly, repository 3 also has a central node selected which had address of all the computers in this network. All right. Now, people decided that connection should be allowed between these distributed networks. Okay, we can say this as inter-network communication. Okay. So allow this inter-network communication, some TCP/IP protocol was developed. All right. Has anyone heard of this protocol? Can you please tell me? Tell everyone.
So IP was to definitely mean internet protocol. I
Right.
forget what TCP exactly is, but yeah, somehow related.
Yeah. So TCP is the transmission control protocol, and IP here is internet protocol. All right. So TCP is a set of standard protocols. So and we're told that internet is a set of global communication protocol. Of course, it has some protocol. One of the important, which we even use today, is TCP/IP protocol. All right. So this TCP protocol was the standard way in which messages were to be organized. Okay? So this ARPANET here has a way in which its messages were formed so that it could be sent within ARPANET computers. Similarly, this network too, so there were other networks like NSLNet, CompuNet. So these were the different other private networks which were created alongside CompuNet. Okay? So this network two also had a message creation protocol in which message was being packed into the system. Similarly, this also has a message, but there was no standard way among all the networks. So TCP/IP was created that a standard way of message creation could be introduced in the system, so that if message is to be sent from ARPANET to the second network would be able to understand that message. Alright, so this is the protocol that we use today. Similarly, this IP protocol here was Internet protocol. So this created domains on the internet. So currently we have domains like .edu, .org, .com, .io. All right. So it also with the help of DNS actually, these things were created. Domains were created on internet. But basically, IP was the way in which these computers could be addressed. Alright, so there should be a way in which these computers should be reachable. Plus, there should be a way in which message could be understandable in between these computers. So that was the time when TCP/IP was created. Okay, and communication between these networks were possible. So this at the time was called Web 1.0. All right. So Web 1.0 only computed web pages, all right, in which there was static content. Okay? So if I have to go from one web page to another web page, so that was not possible directly into this kind of system. All right. Any problem till now?
There's no problem, but if possible, could you speak, even if just a little bit, about the technicalities of how that system worked?
Which system?
No, I'm talking about the what you would call the Web 1.0. So we're talking about these individual systems of computers that are linked together. Let's start with a centralized registry that each computer has to plug into in order to be able to communicate with the other. At some point, we have multiple groups. There needs to be a system that allows all of them to work together. Then we get TCP, which is a way of structuring a message so that all computers um, in the entire system can all understand each other. What I'm asking is, could you speak a bit about technically how that was done? Like, what was the underlying technology that allowed for this to even work? So, what was it that made it that those computers, the first computers, could even talk to each other and then so on.
All right. So I actually do not want to go much into it, but just for covering it, actually at that time, so these computers were talking through packet switching. All right. So this was the way in which messages were arranged, and they were as it was only because at that time there needs to be a direct communication or direct line of communication between two computers. So at that time, if you remember, there were phone calls, there were computer operators. So they used to plug, if person A wants to talk to person B, so they used to manually put plugs between tabs of person A and person B so that a direct line of communication could be created. All right. So that was the way actually these computers talk. All right. It was then replaced by packet switching. So packet switching, what it did was, so in the single line, direct line of communication between systems, various messages could be packed in the form of packets. All right. Now this packet, it can contain messages via email, which may also be some files which could be shared between people. All right. So this was the way different messages were being passed. All right, between these systems. Now, addressing of all these computers were different into different networks. Okay. So DNS came in place. So here, DNS came into place so that different computers could be um, accessed within a same top level domain. For example, there's a computer at maybe MIT, all right? So that computer would be registered under EDU domain. Okay. Under EDU domain, that computer would be at the second level domain, that is MIT.edu. So that's how I would identify. So maybe that computer is one. So one.mit.edu. So this was roughly a way in which a computer was addressed after DNS. All right. So if I to consult to this address, what I would do is I would first go to this EDU domain. Okay. A computer would be there which would be having addresses of all the computers into EDU domain. All right. Then I will go to MIT, the second level domain. Okay, a computer would be there which will be hosting DNS service for this MIT. So it will have address of all the computers into MIT domain. So maybe there are 10 computers. So it will have the address of all the 10 computers, and it will redirect me to one.mit.edu. Alright. So this was the way messages were actually directed. Alright. Now in 90s, I guess it was 89 or 91 around, there was a person called Tim Berners-Lee. I hope we have all heard his name somewhere. Okay. Even if we have not, okay. Okay. He created the concept of World Wide Web. All right, we call him the father of web, and he used this all right, in between web pages. So hypertext was a way for easy. So in a Wikipedia page, we have several other links available. through which we can directly go to that particular page. Okay, so we do not have to type its address ourselves. It is possible using this HTTP, which introduced hyperlinks in between web pages. All right, so this actually highly increased the number of people who are on internet, and many number of startups were being, and many money was being poured, millions of money was poured into internet development of new companies, new startups were being there. So at this time, there were few messaging services. I hope everyone may have used those messaging services. So some of them were AOL, then we have Yahoo Messenger, which was there. So these kind of messaging services and other email protocols were coming into place. Then there came the era of um, big tech giants like Google, all right, Twitter. So this was in 2000s around. Till that time, before this time actually, dial-up was being used for internet connection. Okay, so dial-up means that phone line was used for message passing between computers. All right, so this was very slow. Um, I guess around its maximum speed was 20 kbs per second. So if I have to download a song, it would take me few hours on this network, and if I have to download a movie, it was painstakingly slow, like 2 3 days it took to download a movie. All right, this actually was replaced by broadband. Okay, so can anyone tell me what broadband is?
Can I?
Okay.
It's a network of very broad or wide throughput.
Mm, yes, it has um, higher speed, you can say, if you are comparing it like that. So speed was very high. So anything that time, phone lines were used. So anything other than phone line, which was being used for communication, for example, cables, TV cables, yeah. So these wires were used, which directly were sending digital signals, so that we can have a broader spectrum and higher speeds for transfer of any media between computers. Okay, so this actually shaped up internet a lot. Now we have a very high speed as compared to dial-ups. So we have very higher speeds. Now people can send photos, videos, they can chat. All right. So this kind of traffic was getting increased a lot into the system. Many new messaging services were increased. There came the concept of social media. All right. Um, Reddit was created. There were certain blog posts which came into existence. All right. Um, these social medias, specifically these kind of applications on internet, they allow people to create content of their own. So now, if I'm interacting with anyone, I can create my own profile. All right, I can upload my own media. I can download anyone else's media. I can create my profile, and I have many other options to interact with. All right, so this highly increased the traffic on internet. So at this time, this was the time actually these tech giants like Google, Twitter, Facebook. Amazon, these took over the internet. Alright? How? Because now we have a very high volume of data. Okay? So data. Okay. Now this data has to be somewhere. Okay. These companies, for example, Google, could not handle this data, this high amount of data, its traffic, in like hundreds of computers in its office. It could not do it anymore. So what they did was they hired a space, they assembled some hundreds or thousands of computers there, and they stored all that data in these computers. So this was called data centers. All right. So this data center, it was initially established by tech giants. Then later, some small companies, they also wanted a piece of cake. So they hired some space from this data center, and the business model of company started shifting to data. All right. So this data, along with storing um, the user preferences, user interactions of everyone in the network, they could do other things also with this data, right? So they chose to analyze this data. All right. So by analyzing this data, because they have a lot of data which is just sitting idly. So one of the use for this data was whenever a person would query, they would return any required data back to the person. But other than that, they could use this data to analyze and find some patterns. Okay? And if they have find the pattern, they started finding interesting patterns in this data. So what they did was um, they started finding preferences of people. For example, who I am friends with, what am I like, what kind of pictures I like, what kind of places I would like to go. Alright. So by using this information, initially we just had data. Alright. Now we have information. So this was a very important step in evolution of web. Now, earlier it was internet of data. Now we have internet of information. Okay. So using this data, they could sell this data to other interested companies so that they can maybe advertise some of the products to us. Okay. So these companies chose to actually sell our data. Many of the companies do so. Okay. We highly believe the company when we use their products for free. But what they actually do is that they share this recently found knowledge, interesting patterns with other companies. Right. So this particularly is Web 2.0, where which is till now we have seen that it is highly decentralized. Okay, so these data centers in 2000s, many of the companies in US, UK, Russia, so these were the countries where these data centers were opened in very high numbers. Alright. So we'll just go back to Web 1.0 here, and we look at the pattern of evolution of these systems. So initially, we have had these distributed systems. So one, two, three, and many other such networks were distributed systems. So this was how internet started, where communication between these networks was made possible using TCP/IP. All right. So here we have a distributed system.
Anuba,
Okay.
I have a question. Sorry. sorry if I may ask now,
Yes, please.
can you tell later on maybe what's exactly difference between distributed and decentralized?
Yeah, all right. We will actually cover this in the next session in more
Okay,
details, but then I'll also tell the basic thing.
okay,
Another point which I would like for you to notice is that in a particular network, we chose one computer to hold addresses of all other computers in that network. Alright? For example, in network 2, we chose this particular computer to be holding addresses of all other computers. Okay, so this here is point of centralization. Okay, this computer have had issues in keeping track of all the updated addresses, and it had a high traffic of queries from other computers to find out address of other computers. All right. So we have had components of decentralization, centralization within networks in the system. From here, with the evolution of web and broadband, we move toward a system, Web 2.0, which we do okay. So there economy of all these tech companies that became data centric. Okay, so so they began finding out patterns from this data, and it came out to be a very centralized version of internet. Now, today, if I want to, actually, there's a very good article I'll share it with you guys. There was a lady who tried to get off Google. So, by using different applications, some alternatives of Google. So, she cannot even find very good applications everywhere. So, if you have to find an email service, there are email services, video streaming services. YouTube is controlled by that. There are messaging services which are controlled by Google. Similarly, Facebook also is actually it bought WhatsApp few years back. All right, so it bought WhatsApp so that it could have preference of how people are interacting with other people. All right, so it has become a data centric model. Companies are trying to acquire more so that they can do targeting and sell this data to other people. This was Web 2.0. Now, using blockchain, a different kind of internet is being envisioned, which is called as Web 3.0. Okay? So, the major pillars of this um, kind of internet is decentralization, like how the internet was in its earlier day, but with all the new services, this is actually the goal of this Web 3.0. It wants to change the internet to internet of value. So we have internet of data, then we had in current state internet of information. Now it could be changed to, or it is in progress of being going towards internet of value. Okay, so by value I mean assets, our money, for example Bitcoin, Ether, okay, other financial assets like our stocks, some loyalty points, our intellectual properties, okay, our art, music, mm, even our digital identity that is being converted into assets and being stored on blockchain. So you may have heard about NFTs. Okay, so there is a huge NFT the culture which is going on, which is trying to mainly focus currently in this art, music, this kind of sector. But there are many projects which are basically Web 3.0 focuses on digital identity. So they are trying to convert digital identities as NFTs. So what this Web 3.0 offers? This Web 3.2 offers 3.0 offers more privacy. Okay? We will later on see how blockchain would be able to provide more privacy or not, but this is the ultimate goal. So it hopes to provide more privacy, more control of data, because right now we have uh, very less control on our data. Okay, so Web 3.0 provides want to provide more control on our data to us. Now, if we want, we can choose to sell our data maybe for personalized suggestions, okay, to maybe companies like Amazon or Facebook. So if we would like, we can do that. That could be done using NFTs. Right? This privacy here could be achieved using digital identity. Okay. This whole picture of Web 3.0, currently it seems a very tall order from here, a far-fetched future. But blockchain, this is what blockchain is doing. Okay, so you may have heard of concepts like metaverse. So this trying to not just gaming, but I'll give an example of gaming industry. So what it is trying to do is that it is trying to decentralizing this gaming industry so that people could have more control on their assets in a game. Okay, so if in a game I have a sword and I would like to take it from one game to another game, which is not possible right now because all these games are different systems. They are not interconnected with each other. But using NFT and in a decentralized world, I may be able to do it. And in between these games, we are able to do so. So that is one of the goals. Another important example of Web 3.0 is DeFi. Has anyone heard of DeFi? Can anyone let me know, please?
Right,
Yes.
decentralized finance.
Yeah, so decentralized finance. Would you care to elaborate?
So again, I think the goal here is there's no central entity to give the service. So it's about reaching the unbanked
Right.
people and all of these concepts put in
Okay,
together.
so what kind of financial services?
Could be funding, maybe
Mm-hmm.
extending credits,
Okay.
microfinance, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Right, of course. So these kind of services like loans, collateral loans, these are being provided by decentralized finance services. Okay, so this is one of the application which we could say is highly decentralized, and we could say one of a very good example of Web 3.0. Okay, so yeah. So DeFi here, we can say it as one of the very good example of Web 3.0, where our web would be headed. In this system, there was very less use of fiat currency. So fiat currency are our native currencies like dollars. Okay, so there was very less use of dollars. We required dollars to actually initially get into decentralized finance to buy some tokens and all. It was not governed by any centralized agency like government or other economical institute or financial institute. So you can say of it as a parallel economy which was created on the grounds of decentralization. Okay, so this was a very good example at that time of decentralization. blockchain. So this was the overall picture which I wanted to give to you before we move into blockchain, and we will see how blockchain should be and would be providing all these services and how blockchain could be used to create this Internet of Value. All right. So if there is any question till now, you can ask me.
I have a question. I try to
Yeah.
explain myself with better words. We can think that blockchain is a layer over the Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. But blockchain is principally a data structure, and the Web 1.0 and Web 2.0 are not a data structure, are principally protocols protocols and the system that store data and then elaborate data and then services that we can use. Blockchain, that is a data structure, uh, is inefficient in respect to the a database or um, another other type of interaction that we can have with other systems. So, how can we integrate correctly the blockchain in this system? Because it is an important thing. Is a thing that a lot of people say me. They say me, blockchain is inefficient and is very slow and must be validated in the correct way. Have a consensus that must be decentralized or centralized in some cases. So, um, how many times we can uh, we can hypothesize to use this technology at 100% of its power.
Okay. So right now we cannot say that how much time it would take for the current blockchain technology to actually empower in 100% in Web 3.0 access in our next. All right, but we are getting there slowly. For example, one of the important problem with blockchain is data storage. Okay, and we GBs of data actually we have keep in the past. So how blockchain would be able to keep access to it. Okay? So right now, so technology using this system and this with some of the projects are being done. Okay? Blockchain would be extracting data storage, not depending on systems that are in the past. And there are other system when there is zero knowledge base for which we can not store data but proof of data from the blockchain. Okay, so this is how slowly we are going to put our data on the blockchain. So if we have some mathematical computation in the past, what we can do is we just can put its proof on top of the blockchain rather than computing everything on top of blockchain, taking all the data on top of blockchain. This is one of the very good ways we can use. So it is in the process of being evolving. There is a very good project which is called as Quantum computing. So these are some zero knowledge protocols which are being used for data to be stored on top of the blockchain. So we are not yet there. Very good question here, but we are trying to be there. Other than that, currently, when we try to log in into maybe some tool, for example, for this session, I wanted to use this plugin, okay, so that my background noise will go down. So when I from Google or some social media and all. So my data was being transferred from Google to this topic. Okay, maybe this AI just wanted to confirm maybe my age and some other factors here. So instead of sharing all of my data from FB, maybe I can do a selective sharing. That selective sharing could happen if I put my identity in form of NFT. Okay? Or maybe some zero knowledge proof which I would share to this.ai, maybe to prove that my age is greater than 18 years. Okay? So in that way, all of my data from FB or any other social media which I'm using for login would not go to this topic. Okay? So not all the control, but we have a better control of our data, our personalized identity using changes. Okay, so and this is the name of the service, which is or the protocol OSS. These are the protocols which are developing blockchains for handling identities from FP, making it in form of NFTs and then selective sharing with the NFT. Okay? So
Remember what is FP? Ah, okay. Got it.
yeah, so this is how we can do that. Um, so Alessandro, you are actually correct. We are very far away from completely being a decentralized system, but many good projects are coming up here. And this is a bigger picture maybe in the future using blockchain. We will get. Alright. So does anyone kind of have something other about?
So, Anuba, what you said, even if I may rephrase, so the governance part could be, could where blockchain might not on the data storage.
Yeah. Data storage for internet, it is very difficult if blockchain is not hard. It is not good for heavy data storage because blockchain actually replicates data among all its nodes.
Hmm.
Okay?
Sure.
So if it is replicating and some data would not make sense to be replicated over and over. If we have a movie, maybe some GB, 1 GB, so not thousands of systems, it would not make sense there. Okay, so there it may not be able to replace now, but some other system will come. All right. So so now we will move to our first topic, which is what is blockchain. So can you share see my screen?
Just the screen's loading now.
I go away from keyboard 1 minute.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So till the time Alessandro is coming back, we'll just have a look at what we are going to learn in this session. So we will be covering and a very crude picture of what blockchain is, because the different component of blockchain we will learn over the sessions, but just bigger picture of what blockchain is, overview of it. Then we'll go to how blockchain was actually introduced to us and it is being used into a Bitcoin system or other cryptocurrency and other blockchain systems. Then it is important for us to look at what blockchain is not. One of the important points that we have seen is that blockchain is not a solution for data storage. Okay, for uh, uh, big data, we, we have we'll directly move into that.
Anup, I had one question before just go blockchain. Maybe in this course, we also teach a bit about other DLTs. Like, the lot they use, right? No, so
They go, but they are I operate under the these I have to go
in
all. So for me to decide who I send my money to if I'm okay to take that risk. So why the bank is telling me who the I have to interact with? It is okay with other stock exchanges or buying any other hedge funds or other thing, but it has problem with these crypto exchanges. It's a big no. Okay. Um, I can send money to maybe decentralized exchanges where banks would not know who am I interacting with. But in case of these big exchanges like Coinbase, okay, Binance, so their bank decides who I do interact with. Okay, and other than this, there are problems like many countries in South Africa. There, they do not have much of the population actually there is unbanked. Okay, they do not have access to banking services. There are limitations in terms of who these banks give loans to. Okay, so there are restrictions in financial services that a person could get using these centralized services. Okay, so here are a big factor of centralization in the current scenario. So, other than social interactions, there are problems with business, social, political, and various other interactions. Okay? So, blockchain is an attempt so that all these interactions which are happening right now in these scenarios which we have talked about and many other scenarios. So, if those could be taken from there and could happen in a decentralized manner. Okay, we will see how these would happen. But the main takeaway from here is that blockchain is trying to convert our systems from centralized points to decentralized systems because in centralized systems we have less control. Other than that, in centralized system, for example, there is a database of FB. Sometimes it happens. So because of high loads or denial of service attacks or some other kind of security attacks, like attacks on my credit card data and all that, I am not able to access my data or my data is not secure. Okay, so this happens in case of centralized systems. Okay, because there is a single point of failure. In centralized system, there is one database where my data is being stored. All right, it may be replicated to many other parts of the world, but still there would be 3-4 points of failure. Okay, so we refer to it as single point of failure. So that is one of the big problem with any of the centralized system. Okay, so we do not want that. That's why blockchain is an attempt to move to a decentralized system. Okay? We can say to blockchain, let me just remove all that. So blockchain, we can refer to it as a data structure. Okay? So data structure is a way in which data is stored in computer. Okay, so blockchain is a data structure because it basically changes the way data is stored. Okay, data here is the interaction between parties. It may be two people swapping money. It may be casting a vote. Okay, it may be some product handing chain, some product being exchanged between people. Okay, so all these interactions are stored into this data structure. This data structure is comparable to a decentralized database. Okay, Okay, we will see how that is structured actually, but basically it is a database which is decentralized. It is not at one place, so it does not have a single point of failure. So our problem earlier of single point of failure could be fixed with having a decentralized and distributed database. Okay. Alright. So this is the database that we're talking about. It has a fixed length block. Okay. So the block here stores some transactions. So transactions here are interactions which are happening between parties. Those are arranged in the form of fixed length blocks. Okay, so that basically is the blockchain. It is a data structure which is decentralized, which is distributed, which has transactions and which are stored in terms of blocks. So these are the 4 points that we have learned till now about Bitcoin blockchain. So if anyone has any doubt till now, you can please ask.
I have no doubt, but I would, but the word we're talking about, you know, we're going to get into distributed ledger, right? But the word distributed is being already, we're using it a lot. So could we get some deeper explanation of what, in this sense, distributed really means and how it relates to all of this?
Oh, all right. So I'll just move to next slide, and there we will see um, what this distributed thing is. So we will come back to this origin of blockchain after we understand what distributed here is. Okay. So it is getting messy. Let me just erase everything, or I can just do it all things.
Maybe there's a way to do it once.
All right. So here, uh, one of the classic examples of blockchain is transferring money between two parties. Okay. So here we have a banking system which we use, which is actually a middleman here. So this is a centralized system, and the other one, the lower part, is a decentralized system. We'll see how that is decentralized. Okay? So here, now if Alexa wants to transfer some money to Bobby, okay, so it does it through a banking system. Okay, so we are talking about digital transactions. If it is directly cash transaction, then there is no money, no problem. Alexa can directly hand over the bills to Bobby, and that transaction could be done. But if we are talking about digital transaction, I mean interaction between these two guys. Okay, so what is the role of bank here? Can anyone tell me, please? Why do we need a bank here
For
for this
settlements,
interaction?
I think.
We need a
Okay.
bank to write on the ledger, so we know when the transaction has happened, what has been in the transaction, and so on. They're the middlemen writing down the ledger for us, the government, etc.
Okay, so the bank is what do we say? It is doing the work of an accountant. Okay, sorry, I missed Krishna. What did you say?
No,
Can you
I
please
think
repeat?
Ratko explained it very well. So I wanted to say this, but yeah.
Okay. So our transactions have to be written somewhere, because if I am given the job to keep a track of all my transaction, I can anytime say that I have, maybe even if I have 20 bucks, I can say I have 50 bucks, okay, maybe 500 bucks. So that is up to me. So we need some of the service here which could enforce trust between parties. Okay. Plus, another thing is, in case of digital transactions, if I make a digital version of my money, okay, so a digital version of anything on my computer is just a file, okay. So, if I have a MP3 file and I have to transfer it to a friend, so I can just make a copy of that MP3 file and I send it to other person. No harm there. Okay, I can do that very well. But in case of money, if I make a copy, okay, so that would give rise to a problem of double spending. Okay, I can if Alexa send $10 to Bobby, then Alexa should not have $10 in her account. Okay, so if nobody is there to check this or nobody is there to account for this, Alexa can send that $10 to someone else, or Alexa can say that I have sent Bobby $100. Okay, and Bobby would be saying I have just received $10. Okay, so for accounting, okay, to avoid the double spending of digital asset or digital money, we would need some middleman here. Okay, so take care of all the transactions that are happening between two people. So this middleman here is creating this trust. All right. We do not trust two parties. Maybe Alexa and Bobby are friends, but we do transact with many other people we do not know about. All right. So we need someone or some system in place which could uphold the trust of our transaction. Okay. So no, the other person cannot say that he or she has not received the money or cannot say something otherwise. Okay. So that's why we would need bank here. Okay, so trust is a very important word which is um, introduced into which we have to do into centralized system. We have to trust our banking system. Why? Because maybe the central bank of our country is involved, or maybe some other banks which we are directly dealing with are involved. Because they say so, that's why we are trusting them. Okay, there is no way in which this trust is ensured. We just trust them because they are maybe some institutions which are handled by government, okay, or maybe in case of social media interactions, because these are very highly famed companies like Google and Facebook. So just because they have said so, that's why we trust them with our data. Okay, so there the trust is because they have said so. Okay, now in the blockchain system, the goal is to ensure this trust. Okay? It is not because the other party has said so or any other middleman has said so. So, the one of the important goal of blockchain system is to ensure this trust. Okay? Now, in a centralized system, if Alexa has to pay some thing to Bobby, which we had seen because this bank here, or it may be a series of banks there. Okay, maybe Bobby is in two different banks, so there may be another bank. If in case it is an overseas transfer, so there may be 10, 12 different parties here through which this money would be passed to Bob. Okay? Because in overseas transfer systems like SWIFT, so in that case, um, we have a lot of middlemen here. Okay? Now, this bank here keeps a ledger with it in which it will have accounts details of Alexa and Bob, like how much money is credited, how much money is debited. Okay, so it will keep record of everything. So we need bank here for doing the record. This bank is a single entity, so we can say that it is a centralized system. Okay, coming to blockchain based system, what happens is that this record is entrusted with Alexa. This record is entrusted with Bobby plus whatever other um, people are there into this network. They a copy of Alexa and Bobby. These are records of everybody in this network. Okay? So if we have 10 people here, so everyone here will have copy of record of everyone else. Okay? So this here is a distributed system. This distributed system has data replication. So in general, in distributed databases, what happens is that data is divided in some sense and then sent to different systems. Okay, so when there comes a query, so maybe different other systems are queried together and we get our complete data back. All right, but in case of blockchain, everyone gets the entire copy of data. Okay, so that's how data is replicated into every system, and in this sense, this we say the system as a distributed system. Okay, because there is no single point of failure. If this particular node goes down, by node I mean the computer system which is operating this particular person, the P1. Okay, so if in the case this node goes down or it is not working at the moment, I can get data of balance of Alexa or Bobby from other systems in the network. Okay, so there is no single point of failure. There comes a distributed system. Okay, um, Andrew, I hope the word distributed now makes some sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense because what I'm essentially formulating in my head is that Web 3.0 is essentially taking the initial setup of Web 1.0 with the services and advancements of Web 2.0 and essentially mixing them together, and now we get Web 3.0 because of the essentially the the failures of centralization and the risk that were involved. Of course,
Right.
as I think we're going to learn, there's some other risk involved as we move
Yes.
forward, but we'll deal with that later.
Yeah, so every system has a risk. We will go through the risk of Web 3.0 also. Okay. So, but currently completing the entire picture, we will look at each component of how everything is achieved. But overall, now everyone has a copy of all the records. So now, if Alexa wants to transfer money to Bobby using a Bitcoin-based system or any other blockchain-based system, so what will happen is it will send its transaction. It will first have to create a transaction. Okay, so that transaction will be created by Alexa's wallet, or Alexa can herself create the transaction also. So we will not go into the technicality of that, but somehow she has created a transaction. So this transaction goes to the network of systems which are connected to each other in a random order. Okay, so different blockchains have different ways in which these nodes are connected. Okay, so now we assume that this is the particular order in which these nodes are connected. Now Alexa has sent this transaction to the network. Alexa will send this transaction through internet. Okay, it can send these transactions off internet also. It does not matter. There should be a medium of transaction between parties. Now, every person who is into this network will go through the transaction of Alexa and it will do the job of bank. Okay? So bank was checking, bank was doing the record. Okay, So in the record keeping process, bank was checking that the addresses of Alexa and Bobby should be correct. Alexa should have money $10 in her account at least so that she could send those $10 to Bobby. Okay, and different other checks, whatever are required in a banking system, that was being done by bank. Now, the work of that bank, or we can say any middleman into the system, could be done using blockchain. Here, every node in the blockchain will check the transaction of Alexa, alright? And if it finds this transaction to be perfectly fine, like all the if and buts of the transaction are being checked, followed, and are correct, so it will process this transaction here, okay, include it into a block, because earlier we had seen what block is. In the blockchain, all the transactions are included in block, okay, and then it will send the money to bot, okay. So we can in a sense say that here our network, that is blockchain, has assumed the role of middleman from a centralized system, okay. Now these nodes here are not in control of a single entity. These are all different systems, user like you, me, okay, and many other users across the globe. So we will also see how this trust is actually ensured. Okay? But if you can tell me what is the basic difference between this middleman here and this middleman, one of the very basic differences. Anyone would like?
There is no only one middleman, but there is a certain amount of middlemen that certificate that that transaction is correct.
Again, there can be multiple middlemen here in the banking system as well.
I think that the main difference is that the fees are much smaller when there is no middleman. I mean, there should be no fees except running the network.
Okay, so one of the point is fees, number of middlemen. Anything else?
I mean, it actually here the middleman can sometimes act on his own. Like he can decide. Like in your case, you said no. Bank said, "Why are you buying something with Coinbase?" That cannot be said here. Actually,
Actually, yes, correct. So less control
hmm
of some other entity on my assets.
How about the sort of expansion of verification? Now it's not just a single entity saying, "Oh, this is good," but it's checked by multiple users. So it actually, in a certain way, should increase the overall amount of trust because it's being verified by multiple nodes in the network.
All right. So a very good point here is that there are multiple people or multiple middlemen involved in the system. What this implies is, so in a banking system, um, different banks have some certain people or some certain softwares which do this checking when money is being transferred. Okay? So if so these systems, these are the same systems every time. So if I have to send money 10 times to Bobby or some other person, I will be checked by same number of people, same people, okay? Same set of people. But in decentralized systems like Bitcoin or Ethereum, okay, or Cardano, this person who is going to create a block for me would be changing. It would be on a rotation basis or it would be on a random basis. For example, in Bitcoin, in every 10 minutes, a new person would be validating my transaction and putting it into blockchain. Okay, so I'm not giving control to a single person here. In Ethereum, this would happen more frequently, maybe in 10-15 seconds. In Cardano, it would happen within seconds, I guess 7 seconds something. So that will happen. Okay, so this is a very important point here that um, there are multiple parties and we are not trusting a party for a greater amount of time. Okay, now if a party misbehaves, there are systems in place in this network. For example, in case of Ethereum or in case of any proof of stake system, in that case, what would happen is if any party would misbehave, they would be heavily penalized. Okay, or in case of Bitcoin system, that particular block would be rejected and someone else gets a chance to include that transaction into the system. Okay, so now we are trusting, we can actually have more trust into this system because we do not have to trust a single party. Okay, so the trust is on a rotation basis. Okay, and there are some other cryptographic mechanisms in place also here which would ensure the trust between parties. All right, so this was one of the bigger picture of Bitcoin. All right, we'll just go back to our previous slide which we had left. Okay, okay. So blockchain, it initially started with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was, can anyone tell me who was the creator? It's written here actually. It was Satoshi Nakamoto. We do not know actually who Satoshi Nakamoto is. There are various speculations behind who that person is, but whoever that is, he was a cyberpunk. So there was a movement in 90s where many people who maybe some cryptographic experts or who were advocates of um, privacy for digital identities over internet. So those people had a movement called cyberpunk, and they had a mailing list of all the enthusiasts. So what Satoshi Nakamoto did was, uh, on the day of Halloween in 2008, he dropped an email containing this paper. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Okay, so I would just recommend you all to go and just check out that paper. You may leave the technicalities, what is there, but then even if you read the extract of that person, he clearly tells why he's writing that paper, what is actually his intention behind creating such kind of decentralized system. And this guy, what he did was, uh, in his, he was actually yeah. So this guy was a big advocate of decentralization, and what he did was he included this message into the first block of Bitcoin. Okay, so in 2008 his white paper came. Okay? And in 2009, I guess January 2009, he, 3rd January, he created the very first block of blockchain, which we call as Genesis block. So in a block on any blockchain, they can include some data. So he included this data on that particular block. So he wrote that Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. So it somehow relates to the centralization of banks. Like if the banking system collapses and all, so there are heavy chances that banks in this system maybe are on the verge of some bailout. It may have happened sometime there in UK. So it was actually the headline of newspaper in UK, in London. Okay. So he included this here. So it gives us some clue that this person was something in London. Okay. We do not know who that person is. It may be more than one person also, maybe a team behind the revolution of Bitcoin, but we do not. Okay. So this paper, if you will read, it refers, it never refers coined the term blockchain. It was not around at that time. He just said it as chain of blocks. So the data structure that he had created or he had thought of creating, he named it as chain of blocks. Later on, another early adopter of Bitcoin, which was Hal Finney. So he was also being thought that he is actually Satoshi Nakamoto. Okay, but in the later years of his life, he said that he is not Satoshi Nakamoto. He was the first person to receive some bitcoins from Satoshi Nakamoto. Okay? He had created other systems. Um, I guess the Gcash was created by him. I'm not sure.
The proof of work he created.
Sorry?
He created the proof of work consensus algorithm.
Proof of work was created by Adam. Let me It was created by Adam Bass in the Hashcash system. So this guy, he I don't know when it was. Okay, I guess it was Digicash that we had created at that time. He was a very early adopter of Bitcoin and contributor into Bitcoin source code. Okay, so there were certain revisions done after Satoshi Nakamoto dropped in 2009 the source code of Bitcoin. Okay, so it was an open source. Anyone could change it, modify it, do some experimentation with it, use it for transferring money. Okay, so he was one of the early adopters of Bitcoin. There were other contenders for Satoshi Nakamoto. For example, Nick Szabo. He was also from the cyberpunk movement. So he was also thought to be maybe he was Satoshi Nakamoto or not. No, nobody has actually accepted that they are Satoshi Nakamoto except for one person. His name is Craig Wright, and he's okay. So he denied at first, but then he did some digital signatures from the initial addresses of Satoshi Nakamoto. So it was thought that he may be Satoshi Nakamoto, but recently his claims had been rejected that those addresses do not belong to him and that belong to some other person in the Bitcoin community. So I guess he's not the creator of Bitcoin. He has though created some other systems like Bitcoin SV. Okay, so Bitcoin SV is a fork of Bitcoin. We will see to what forks are. So it is a similar system, similar cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, which was created from the source code of Bitcoin only, and he named it Satoshi Vision. Okay, so this was one of the fork of parallel system you can say of Bitcoin. So this was created by Fred Guy. There was another person which is still in the race of being declared as Satoshi Nakamoto. His name is Adam Nan. He created in the initial days, in like I guess 2015 around, he created one good project which he called as Blockstream. So it had the initial vision of uh, Web 3.0. Okay, so so he wanted to create. So this was his project, which he wanted to convert the centralized internet to a decentralized version of internet. So this was the person. He also created a system called as hash cash. If you will go through the paper of Bitcoin, the Satoshi Nakamoto, he took inspiration from this hash cash system. Okay, so this hash cash system was he created it to reduce the email spam. So what he did was, the spams, they are being sent in bundles, like in abundance, to thousands of people at the same time. So what he did was he actually created the complexity of mailing anybody. Okay, so he introduced proof of work. Okay, so in sending any email, a person has to do some mathematical calculation. Okay, so he has to submit some proof of work that he has done a mathematical calculation to send a particular email. Okay, so if it is a spam, so they would not bother doing this big calculation. Okay, because the spams are sent to thousands of people at the same time. How we send to thousands of people at the same time, and it is not possible for a spam generate. He used this proof of work for a miner to prove that he has done enough amount of work to create a block. Okay, so we will see how that particular thing works, but this was one of the basic inspiration behind that. Okay, so it was helping to refer to blockchain as chain of blocks, which was mentioned in Satoshi's paper as blockchain. Okay, so this was a brief history of how blockchain came into existence. We will have a look at its genesis of in I guess in the next. So I'll just pause here, and if anyone has any doubt, you can let me know. And yeah, Krishna has said that he is hoping that uh, David Schwartz from Ripple is not Satoshi. I have no idea actually. But yeah, as you have mentioned Ripple, so it's a very good example here. So what Ripple is, it is a system of based on blockchain using which overseas money is being transferred. Okay, so the work which is being done by protocols like Swift, so Ripple can come in place to replace that system. Okay, so one of the important points which I had missed here is that in this case, when we had high number of intermediaries in between, okay, so in that case, fees was higher because more number of people are involved. So as more number of people are involved, so who takes even 20% of the fee, on the area is in between you are transferring the money. Okay? Depending upon how many middlemen are there in between to transfer the money. Okay? So the fees heavily depends there. In case of any blockchain or maybe Bitcoin, this fee follows a flat fee structure. Like it does not matter how much money or what asset is being transferred, it is the same fee irrespective of the transaction. It just depends upon the size of transaction. But yeah, it follows a flat fee structure. But it does not always mean that a blockchain system is going to be cheap because cheaper than the banking system. Because you may have heard the skyrocketing fees of Ethereum last year. Okay, so Ethereum for clearing one transaction, Ethereum was charging $20. maybe $10 or some kind of amount, maybe $50 in
And
some
even
case.
today it's high. That's,
Yeah, even
yeah.
today it is high also. It depends upon the size of the transaction, but yeah, these fees are high in case of it. If you see Polygon, it is in some sense maybe. In Cardano also the fees is low currently, but then it depends upon the system, the contention, the traffic on the network. But P is actually not a suitable comparison here. Uh, but in case of overseas system, time is of utmost importance. So for the overseas transfer, it may take 2-3 days. In some cases, it may take even weeks for money to be between countries. Okay? After deduction of a lot of fees, it takes a lot of amount. But in case of any Bitcoin, for example, if we take Bitcoin, it takes average 10 minutes for a transaction to go through. It again depends upon the network latency, the traffic on the network. We'll see to those factors, but it is approximately there. In case of Ethereum, it is maybe 10-15 seconds. In case of Cardano, it may be some 7 seconds. Okay? So, irrespective of what the transaction is, okay, um, the time is very less for maybe overseas transfer. In case of domestic transfer, of course, bank wins there because the transaction rate of Visa or MasterCard is very high, thousands of transactions per second. For Bitcoin, it is very low, 7 to 10 transactions per second. In case of Ethereum, it is like 20 transactions per second. In case of Cardano, maybe 250 transactions per second. So it is very less compared to Visa and MasterCard. But yeah, maybe by the evolution of each 2.0, so each 2.0 is the newer version of Ethereum where they are changing their consensus protocol. Okay, we'll see what consensus protocol is. I'll just give you. So by that they are saying that they may be able to so hopefully that will happen somewhere this quarter. This is what
No, just 3 days today.
yeah. So
Nothing
what
beats it actually.
so what have I like? What kind of transaction have you witnessed?
No, I mean it's just for transferring from the exchange to the wallet. Uh, I don't see a comparison for anyone. The Stellar is fastest, and I've seen Hedera is
Yeah,
also pretty fast.
we usually do we will not go
But I
to
mean it's not only TPS that
Recording in progress. Prefer following blockchain-based system as trust-free system so that I do not have to uh, trust anyone in the system. Okay, so that is one of the things. Now, I told you, I just mentioned consensus protocol many times. So just to clear, um, in any blockchain-based system, there are various nodes in the system. Okay? So all these nodes hold a copy of, we said that the protocol is a distributed system, right? So they all hold a copy of record of interaction between people. Okay. Now it is a distributed system. One of the very big problem of a distributed system is that this copy should be equal to this copy. This copy should be equal to this copy. So all the copies should be synced with each other. Okay, so if I ask this node, I will get the same result. If I ask the balance of maybe Alexa from this node, it should give me the same result. Same goes for every node in the network. Okay? So one of the very big challenge in a decentralized system is of the syncing of nodes. So there comes this consensus. What consensus mechanism does is it makes sure. So right now, think of it as a black box. We will consider it. We'll actually go through the details of it. But right now, consider it as a black box. And by the end of this, every node in the network would be synced to each other. Okay, so it makes sure that the copy of ledger or the copy of blockchain across the network is going to be same, is going to be same. Okay, so this is the work of consensus mechanism. Alright, we'll look into it in very much detail, but for now, I guess this should suffice. Alright, so if anyone has any problem till now, you can let me know before we move on to next thing.
As I always say, no problem. But just a clarity question. I have one thing about the Web 1.0. So the computers were connecting to each other. All that was going over that network were messages, and there was a central computer that all the
So data works